Naruto. What makes Naruto special? Naruto Uzumaki. I know especially today, people like to say that Naruto is a typical shonen protagonist and nothing special at all. Now, there may be some validity to this comment, but frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Honestly, people that make that outrageous claim are being way too vague about his character in the first place. Most protagonists in a fantasy setting have some sort of tragic past and a dark part of themselves. What matters is the writing of said character and how that's pulled off. And from the get-go, Naruto was written with incredible depth and tact. He seemed on the surface to just be an attention-seeking brat, but through seeing the psychological and emotional reasons behind that behavior, you come to realize it's not that simple. He grew up without parents, and most adults in the village ignored him due to his stigma with the Nine Tails tragedy, and by extension, this meant many kids had a negative idea of Naruto before even meeting him. Naruto would think, well, getting yelled at and scolded is at least being noticed, right? If he wasn't doing that, then he would just be sitting on that lonely swing all day having nothing else to do. There is honestly a part of me that can relate to Naruto. I'd rather not get into why, but let's just say him being an outcast in his very early years because of something he couldn't control resonated with me. Even putting that to the wayside, the sheer genius of this character is something that I and many others hadn't seen, at least in our age, when we were fairly new to watching shows, fairly new to seeing stories like this. A loud, bright, and cheerful boy that in duality had something dark and harrowing on the inside.
Now that's edgy as
Baba Booey.
It's almost like the Nine-Tailed Fox was the complete opposite of Naruto, at least with how the Nine-Tails was portrayed for majority of the show until we came to know him by his real name Kurama. This was a kid that, despite his bad circumstances, was determined to show not just his village, but the world, how he could rise above it and become more than just a knuckle-headed ninja, and that is what resonates with people so much when it comes to this character. And one thing I would like to say about Naruto is there are people in the fandom who like to say, oh,
without the Nine-Tailed Fox, Naruto would be so useless.
And I just have to call that out. That is completely not true, alright? Now, the reason for this is because we see Naruto struggle to do the clone jutsu, sure, and control his chakra for walking on water, sure, but what we come to learn is that this is not because he is a talentless ninja. We later find out that the Nine-Tails chakra was interfering with Naruto's own chakra, and Jiraiya remarks that for Naruto to get to the point that he had with all the chakra interference caused by the Nine Tails was impressive for him to get to that level with all that chakra interference, alright? On top of that, while he may have lacked skills in other areas, let's remember that outside of the academy, Naruto had no one to train him, and I can imagine Naruto being quite different in ninjutsu ability at least, if he had his father and mother mentoring him since childbirth. Then if we look at Naruto in his teenage years, he becomes a skilled ninja even without the Nine Tails. As an Uzumaki, he has a massive well of chakra already, and when he learned Sage Mode, he damn well nearly defeated Pain. Naruto, though, did not achieve all these things alone. And again, maybe it's a usual shonen trope, but I think Naruto approached the whole you need friends by your side thing with a little more grace. And that brings me to the characters of Naruto. Naruto has an array of characters, some pretty much irrelevant, but others with great likability and character development. When Naruto made friends in the original series, he rarely made friends. Relatively, it was still a small handful of people that would give him the time of day at that point in the series, but without the guiding hand of Iruka, essentially Naruto's father figure, who was the first on screen at least to acknowledge Naruto that he is more than just a demon fox, and he could admit this after he lost his parents to the Nine Tails tragedy. And of course he probably played the most pivotal role in helping Naruto to get out of his depression after Jiraiya's death as well. I mean, right, Iruka, and even without Iruka, there's Jiraiya. He taught him an A-class jutsu, the Rasengan, and of course it took Jiraiya some time to accept Naruto fully, but after that they were inseparable, and to learn under one of the legendary Sannin is definitely what allowed Naruto to catch up to Sasuke eventually in the first place, and it made his death only that much more impactful for the audience. His death gave Naruto a sense of responsibility to carry on what Jiraiya could not, finding a path to peace for the world. Then naturally there's Kakashi Hatake. He was of course also a mentor like Jiraiya. Kakashi is the one who taught Naruto how important your comrades are and how you should never give up on them even when they seem to have strayed from the path completely, right? And I honestly believe that it is Kakashi's dark past and the advice that he gave Sasuke before leaving the village that ultimately led Sasuke to eventually go against the path of hatred and eventually learn to accept the village. Despite his calm demeanor, Kakashi had a warm heart and at times a goofy personality, and honestly that's what's endearing about the characters of Naruto in a whole. No matter how badass they were, they would always have something very human and vulnerable about them. And that brings us to Lord Third, Hiruzen Sarutobi, among the god tier of shinobi. His power was of epic proportions, learning all 5 elements. That was something that hardly anyone knew how to do, but that didn't stop him, in contrast, from probably being the most understanding and kind-hearted in the village. The Third's influence on Naruto is clear. It is the Third's passion for everyone in the village that essentially got Naruto to inherit the Will of Fire, which is essentially the will to never give up, which again made his death one of the most tear-jerking moments in fiction for me, sacrificing his life to stop a tyrant, even if it is his former pupil. And conversely, you can compare the Third Hokage to Itachi Uchiha, because basically, Itachi did a similar thing to Naruto as the Third Hokage. He held the Will of Fire within himself, served the leaf from within darkness. I like to think of Itachi as a Hokage from the shadows, especially in his reanimated state, where he had realized some of his past mistakes with how he handled the burden and how maybe he should have been more open with Sasuke. But at the end of the day, Itachi taught Naruto some very valuable lessons. 皆から認められた者が火影になるんだ. And if we take mentor characters to the wayside, additionally of course, Naruto eventually had the support of his friends, the strongest friends being Rock Lee, Gaara, and Shikamaru. Rock Lee, and by extension Guy Sensei, were such an unforgettable part of the series. Without them, it would have been so much more drab and boring to watch. They brought that needed goofiness and comic relief while also providing us with some of the most badass fights. And that's one area where Kishimoto dropped the ball, honestly. You know, the writer of Naruto, Lee had no major fight in the entirety of Shippuden. He had such cool ones in the original show, and then in Shippuden they're just like, nah, who's Rock Lee again? Like, what? What was that, bro? But, you know, that's past grievances. There's no point in getting annoyed at that anymore. When it comes to Gaara, though, he went from a crazed, murderous lunatic to probably the wisest, most compassionate person his age, wiser than any of the Kage of his time in Shippuden, even convincing a disgruntled old Kage to fight for his old convictions again that he long thought to be a pipe dream. I mean, that's just crazy, in my opinion. And then you have Shikamaru. He was smart from the beginning, of course, but as a child he lacked any real ambition. Ironically though, he was the first to become Chunin of Naruto's troop, and after Asuma died, he realized he had a responsibility to be like his teacher and pass the torch to the younger generation. And it was this sentiment that he passed on to Naruto that basically made Naruto accept Jiraiya's death more easily and inherit what Jiraiya wanted to do from the get-go, which was bring peace to the world, right? And additionally, of course, we have Hinata, who despite being severely outclassed, faced off against Pain one-on-one. Granted, it wasn't a good idea for her, but it was a testament to not just her love for Naruto, but her bravery, which, if you look at her in the original series, in the original bit of Naruto, it was not there. And like, the amount of development she had from being this timid, just completely shy, no confidence in herself, to trying to take on Pain one-on-one, I think that speaks for itself. Unlike Sakura, okay, who had potential to be a really great character. She even had a couple great moments, but Kishimoto kept shafting her for some reason. Would it have been so hard just to make Sakura basically Tsunade minus the gambling addiction? Tsunade was a badass, ruthless, and hardly ever hesitated, and was willing to give her life for the village. Sakura, in contrast, only has her physical strength and healing abilities. Besides that, they share pretty much nothing in common. But before I get on the deep end with Sakura, that is enough about Sakura. The overall point of what I'm saying about these characters is how Naruto would have probably been dead in a ditch before the original show finished, if not for all these characters I mentioned that helped him become who he was by the end of the show, and they all gave him a valuable piece of his personality and values, which makes the show all that more believable. And additionally, how all these characters, whether they be a hero or villain, are endearing because of their believable humanity. Speaking of villains, I would regret it if I didn't talk about the antagonists too, because the villains are all such human characters. Zabuza was a product of his time and setting, ultimately raised to be a barbarian in the hidden mist with no emotion, but Naruto eventually cracked his thick shell and brought him to tears. Orochimaru feared death and the unknown, something that I'm sure many people can relate to. Ultimately, it was this that led him down his dark path of wanting to become the perfect being and know every jutsu. Nagato, or Pain, whatever you want to call him, thought he was just simply doing the right thing, fulfilling Jiraiya's hope for peace, because to Nagato, the only way for peace to be achieved was for everyone to feel the same pain. He was disgruntled with the world, and in a similar fashion, Obito and Madara, seemingly bound by the Uchiha curse, they wanted to put everyone in an infinite dream. Not to be evil, but because they were tired of the suffering world. They wanted no more suffering, no more grievances, and being kids brought up in war times and forced to fight, just imagine how that would mess with your brain. Ultimately, my point is all these characters are motivated by very human things: fear, greed, a false sense of justice. But except for maybe Orochimaru, who realized his wrongdoings a different way, and Madara, who was just too far gone, the rest were touched and changed by what is jokingly called Naruto's talk no jutsu, showing that they weren't just being evil to be evil, but that it was due to their philosophies, and once those were changed, so did their actions. For example, Nagato giving his own life to bring back those he killed as Pain. But what would be the point of well-crafted characters if you didn't have a well-crafted story to go along with them? And lucky for us, Naruto has a story that is hard to beat. Now, before tackling the meat of the story,
Yeah, boy.
I need to address the big, fat, grotesque elephant in the room, the filler. Now yes, sometimes the filler got so ridiculous that it was unbearable, either because it was just too long, or because it was made badly. And by the end of the show, it was so greedy and trying to milk every last morsel that I just ended up reading the last 30 manga chapters that were left, just so I knew how it would all end, and I had never read manga before that, at least not in a dedicated way. Just bear that in mind, okay? So yeah, Naruto's had its share of bad filler, but filler isn't all bad. In fact, there is some filler I'm glad exists, such as trying to find out what's underneath Kakashi's mask, Kakashi's Anbu arc, and Kakashi and Guy's race to the top of the Stone Face Mountain. As well as Naruto as an even younger child than what we saw at the start of the show, and his interactions with the third Hokage.
そうさ、この世界は果てしなく広い。
ちっちゃん、すげえ物知りだってばよ。
With that out of the way, let's look at the meat and bones of this story.
Spicy meat.
The tale told in Naruto is an unforgettable one, and it is one with a consistent message throughout. What is that message? To never give up. To quote the author Masashi Kishimoto, there is only one will, and that is the will of fire, the will that doesn't let you give up. It is a plot thread that is consistent right to the end of Shippuden. Anyone who truly harbored the will of fire achieved their goals. Itachi planted the seeds for Sasuke, albeit slowly, break the Uchiha cycle and finally give up on hatred. If it weren't for Itachi's words to Sasuke, I believe the stalemate at the end of Naruto wouldn't have mattered nearly as much to him. Then there's Guy Sensei, who set out to be the strongest taijutsu practitioner yet. He achieved exactly that, despite his rocky beginnings. Then we have Neji, who was born a slave to the branch family of the Hyuga. But through his inheritance of the will of fire, he died of his own free will. Sure, defending a member of the head family, but under his own volition, not because he was being forced to. And that is what was most important to him, being free of the obligation that at one time he thought inescapable. And he and Hinata changed the fabric of that family. And of course, Naruto also achieved what he wanted to through the will of fire that had been passed down to him by many others. He became Hokage, what he wanted from the beginning. And to put it simply, man, that brought tears to my eyes when I finally saw it, because the story was so long, and to finally see it was just so satisfying to me. And at the end of the day, it is this extremely simple theme that runs from beginning to end of Naruto that makes it so powerful. Even when it stumbled, even when the show wasn't at its best, in the end, those who truly inherited the will of fire achieved the goals that we, the audience, had seen them set. And yes, admittedly, sometimes the story of Naruto is plagued by iffy pacing and way too much expository dialogue, at times treating the viewer like a downright idiot. But the good heavily outweighs the bad, and with a show or manga, whatever you want to call it, this long, it's impressive how consistent it stayed for the most part, making it one of the best stories ever for me. And I'm sure many people around the world too. In fact, I know for many people around the world too. Honestly, what I remember about Naruto is it helping me while I grew up and teaching me some lessons along the way. And that's sort of why I feel like with the problems it has, I just kind of don't care, because at the end of the day, it's still a great show and you can skip what you don't like because the whole show's out now, right? And the same thing goes with the music in that it really did transport me to just this completely different place. Naruto's music was impressive to me as a kid, and honestly still is impressive to me today, and I'm sure it's instilled nostalgia in many others as well. Not just because it's a well-made and unique soundtrack with a fusion of traditional Japanese music and rock, but also due to its sheer amount of tracks and how it stayed tonally consistent from Naruto to Naruto Shippuden, even when the composer changed from Toshio Masuda to Yasuharu Takanashi. Naruto music was masterful in everything, whether it was relaxing you with a theme, like When the Rain Stops, or tugging at your heartstrings with a song like Sadness and Sorrow. Or maybe hyping you up with a piece like The Emergence of Talents. Or even making you feel goofy and mischievous with pieces such as Go Naruto. I love how the music itself so well portrays the many emotions that are the bread and butter of Naruto. The traditional Japanese side of it is obviously due to the ninja setting, and conversely, the rock side of it I've always interpreted to be more about Naruto's rambunctious personality getting thrown into the mix of it. And of course, there are the anime openings as well. Almost every Naruto opening has a banging song and epic animation to go along with it. Okay, yeah, I don't know what they're saying, but do I really need to? I think Attack on Titan is the only anime to rival it in terms of openings, honestly. So far, Naruto has amazing music, amazing characters, and an amazing story, but what about the fights? The fight scenes in Naruto were a damn near out-of-body experience. I mean, the concept of Naruto alone created potential for amazing fights from the get-go, turning ninjas into more than just stealthy perpetrators, but rather superpowered badasses, making the fights a mix of battles between the 5 elements, you know, like get a little Rasengan up your ass, you feel me, with a mix of some real martial arts moves too. Almost every one of the fights was both the most hype shit ever and at the same time so emotional that I just wanted to cry a river full of tears, man. Because not only are the fights great themselves in terms of animation, although sometimes it is questionable, admittedly. The fights are also always very interpersonal things, with so much going on behind them besides just a cool fight. Most fights in Naruto are between people who either know of each other in some way and have clear motivations to fight, or have a deep past with each other. Let me give you some examples. The third Hokage versus Orochimaru, Hashirama versus Madara, Kakashi versus Obito, Minato versus Obito, Itachi versus Sasuke, and Naruto versus Sasuke. In each of their fights, there was more than just a fight going down. There were conversations throughout that added a profound and emotional meaning to each battle. Prime example being Kakashi versus Obito. Even when the characters don't directly know each other yet though, profound conversation is still had, such as what was only known as Pain at the time and Naruto's conversation about what true peace is, or Guy versus Madara, where this was more than just a fight. To quote him, this was him protecting something precious enough to give his life for. It is these emotional tangents that transcends the fights in Naruto. Sure, they are already a cool battle, but there is so much meaning behind each and every one of them. Hell, even Gaara versus Lee. It's literally just an exam battle, but when Guy steps in after Lee's leg has been crushed and talks about how Lee is his pupil whom he loves deeply, the fights in Naruto are more than just powerhouse battles. They are emotional set pieces. I'd also like to quickly mention that when the power scales got huge near the end of Shippuden, Kishimoto was setting this up from the start, when characters state that the waterfall at the final valley was caused by Hashirama and Madara's battle. And when Naruto, Sasuke, Madara, Obito, etc. got huge mountain-shattering jutsu, it was regarded as not normal and a clash of the titans by Guy Sensei himself. So I don't like this idea that Kishimoto somehow lost the spirit of Naruto battles near the end. No, in fact, the spirit of Naruto battles were intact all the way until Naruto versus Sasuke. It was all about still conveying your philosophy to the enemy and all about not giving up. That part was never lost. All in all, Naruto and naturally by extension Naruto Shippuden were shows with one very relatable core message: to instill the will of fire, which you know by now what that means. Alright, so I'm not gonna repeat it again. Combine this core message with the show's legendary character development, music, and fights, it shouldn't be hard to see why Naruto is beloved by so many, and why Naruto will not be forgotten, and why it is already going down as a timeless classic. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy that video. Thank you so much for watching. I know this retrospective was way longer than the Minecraft one, but Naruto is even closer to my heart, and it's such a long series that there was just so much to talk about. In fact, if I had gotten carried away, this thing could have been twice as long, if you can believe that. It could have even gone over an hour maybe, but I thought, no, you know what, let's be a little more general about this. Let's hit all the points I want to, even if I'm going to be brief about things that I would like to write 2 pages about. But, you know, I was like, let me restrain myself. But anyway, if you did enjoy this video, leave a like, a comment, subscribe, and notification bell, because apparently you need that too to get notifications. It's weird, I don't know. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.